Good morning. This is Dr. Wendy Labat, the Financial Healer, and we're here today for day 5 of the Financial Cures Stimulus and PPP Loan Series. I do have several specific questions that I want to go over, so I will be talking about the stimulus as well as the PPP first round and second round and loan forgiveness today. Let's start with the economic stimulus. As you know, that was approved by Congress for individuals to get $600 per person based on your tax return. Now, some people received it already and some haven't. So I'm going to go over some of the steps that you need to take if you haven't received it. And good news, it looks like there's a potential for us to get an additional $1,400 in stimulus payments if Congress approves it once Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are sworn in. So we'll see how that goes. But in the meantime, if you have received your stimulus payment, that is great. If you haven't, there are a number of ways that you can get it. Now, the first thing you need to do is go to irs.gov, click on the Get My Payment tab, put in the information and see the amounts you got the first time and if you got it the second time. If you didn't get it, it will probably say information not available, but you need to know how much you got the first time, because when you file your taxes, you're going to have to file or make sure your tax preparer files the rebate recovery credit form. That will ensure that you get that stimulus payment as part of your income tax refund. Now, let's start with who's eligible for the second round of economic impact stimulus. Generally, anyone that's a U.S. citizen or a resident alien can get it based on their adjusted gross income threshold. If it's $150,000, if you're married, filing joint, $75,000. If you're an individual, and then $112,500 if you're head of household. So depending on how your tax filing status, that will determine how much your income, and it's your adjusted gross income threshold, needs to be to qualify. You aren't eligible if you were claimed as a dependent on another person's tax return. Let's say a child who's a student over the age of 17. You won't get that. Your parents won't get it. And if you don't have a valid Social Security number, and valid Social Security number means one that's used for employment in case of a resident alien. If you're not a resident alien, you're not eligible. People that died before 2020 aren't eligible. And if it's for an estate or a trust, you won't get anything. But again, if you are eligible and you haven't received it, make sure your tax preparer completes the rebate recovery rebate credit form on your tax return. Let's see. Another question was, is an incarcerated individual eligible for the payment? And the answer is yes. Individuals will not be denied the economic impact payment solely because they're incarcerated. Now, an incarcerated individual may be issued a payment if all eligibility requirements are met and the individual filed their 2019 tax return and it was processed by the IRS, or used the non-filer's inner payment information tool. That means that, say if they're on Social Security or something and they don't have to, file, then if they are eligible to receive the payment, they can still get it. Now, they asked what is meant by a Social Security that is valid for employment. It says a valid Social Security number for a payment is one that is valid for employment. So that means if you're in the U.S. and you were issued a Social Security number by the Social Security Administration to use for employment, then you're eligible. Okay. It says, if I filed a married filing joint return in 2019, do both my spouse and I need to have a social security number that's valid for employment to receive a payment? The answer here is no. If you file jointly with your spouse and only one individual has a valid social security number, the spouse will, with a valid social security number, will receive up to $600 payment and $600 for each qualifying child claimed on that 2019 tax return. If neither has a valid social security number, then no payment will be allowed, even if their qualifying children or child has a valid social security number. So you got to have that valid social security number. Okay, here's another question. Who's eligible for the second round of economic impact payments? Again, the adjusted gross thresholds are $150,000 if you're married filing joint, or filing as a qualifying widow or widower. $112,500 if you're head of household, or $75,000 for eligible individuals using the filing status. Now, if your income falls outside of those income ranges, then your payment will be reduced by the amount of 5% of your AGA per dollar, or 5 cents on every dollar. Okay. It says you are not eligible for a payment if any of these apply to you. If you were claimed as a dependent on another taxpayer's tax return, so example of a student or a child who's a college student, or a child who's a student over the age of 17, if you don't have a valid social security number, if you're a non-resident alien, and people who died before 2020, and the estate or a trust. However, you may be eligible to claim a rebate recovery credit on your tax return, again, if you didn't receive your payment for 2019 or 2020. Let's see. There are a couple other questions regarding this that I think I want to talk about. Okay, they're talking about who is considered a qualifying child. It's a person whose relationship to the individual who's eligible for the payment. The child is your son, daughter, stepchild, eligible foster child, brother, sister, stepbrother, stepsister, half-brother, half-sister, or a descendant of any of them. Example, your grandchild, niece, nephew, etc. And the child has to be under the age of 17 before December 31st, 2019. Dependent of the individual who's eligible for the payment. Say the child was claimed as your dependent, or in the non-filer status. Child citizenship. The child has to be a U.S. citizen, U.S. national, or U.S. resident alien. The child lived with you for more than 12 months out of the year. More than 6 months out of the year, I'm sorry. And then the child didn't provide over half of their own supports. That means that you had to provide more than 50% of the support for that child. And the child doesn't file a tax return for the year, or files it only to claim a refund of the income that's withheld. Say if you got a student that's under 17 and they had a little job and they paid a little taxes, but they filed a tax return but didn't claim themselves as dependent, then you're eligible to get a credit for them. And their payment will be $600, just like, the adult. Let's see some of the other... Let's see, I think we're good on all these other questions. Okay, here's one that was posed. It says, I received the first payment after using the non-filer tool. Do I need to do anything to receive this payment? No, there's no action necessary. If you did it the first time with the non-filer tool, that will provide the information. But now you do need to still go to Get My Payment, the Get My Payment tool on the IRS website to get the information about your first payment, how it was distributed. And if you did not get it, then you need to make sure that when you file taxes, you use that rebate recovery credit tool. Okay. Okay, it says, will the non-filer tool be available if I'm not required to file and I didn't use it before November 22nd of 2020? And the answer is no. The non-filer tool is no longer available. If you're eligible for a payment and did not receive one, you must claim the rebate recovery credit on your 2020 tax return. Let's see. Again, people were asking, will my payments be reduced or offset if I owe taxes, child support, or student loans, or any other federal or state debt? The answer is no, that your payment will not offset any federal, state debts, and is protected from garnishment. So you'll get your money, but you'll still owe whatever things you owe. Okay, it says, will my payment be offset if my spouse or I owe past due child support? No. You'll still owe that child support. Your money will come to you. It won't be an offset. Okay, it says, will my second payment be issued on a debit card, the EIP card? It says the IRS, people trying to call in. So you'll be sent either a check or a debit card in the form of the economic impact payment card. Okay, it says, if I receive the first economic impact payment on an EIP card, will the second payment be deposited on the same card? No, you'll be issued a new EIP card, so it will not be reloaded. So look for a new one. The EIP cards are sponsored by the Treasury Department's Bureau of Fiscal Services, so you'll get a new card in the mail. And I think that's it on the economic impact stimulus. Now let's talk about your Paycheck Protection Program. Again, you need to go ahead and apply for full forgiveness if you received your first round of PPP loans. And the forgiveness is during the 8 to 24 week covered period following the loan disbursement. And the bank should have sent you out a new form, because they do have an easy form that's, a little simpler to fill out. And it says the loan proceeds are spent on payroll costs and other expenses, and you have to show that that's what you use it for. Whatever you said you were using it for when you got the payment, that's what you have to use it for. And the loan forgiveness is made sure that you spend it on that, and at least 60% of the proceeds are spent on payroll costs. Okay, to be eligible for your second draw, it can be used again to pay mortgage interest, rent, utilities, worker protection costs related to COVID-19, uninsured property damage costs caused by looting or vandalism in 2020, and certain supplier costs and expenses for operation. Now, for this second round, if the payroll portion is 2.5% of the payroll cost, your monthly payroll cost, if you just have a regular business. But if you have an accommodation business like a hotel or a food service or restaurant business, you can get 3.5% of your monthly payroll cost. Okay, but you also have to demonstrate at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts between the comparable quarters in 2019 and 2020. Say you filed and you use your second quarter 2019 figures. When you apply for this second round, you have to use the second quarter of 2020 gross receipts, and it needs to show a reduction of 25%. Now, if you use your annual 2019 figures, then you need to use your annual 2020 figures, but still you have to show a 25% reduction in gross receipts. Okay, it says the maximum loan amount and increased assistance for accommodation and food service businesses. Like I said, for most borrowers, the maximum amount of the second loan is 2.5% of the average monthly 2019 or 2020 payroll costs, up to $2 million. Now, for borrowers in the accommodation and food service sector, the maximum loan amount for the second draw is 3.5% of the average monthly payroll costs, up to $2 million. And let's see if I've got anything else here that I want to point out specifically. If you are a sole proprietor, self-employed, or independent contractor, when you when they ask the number of employees on the application, you need to put 1, because you are, you are an employee if you're self-employed, independent contractor, or a sole proprietor. Okay, we talked about the gross receipts need to be 25% lower than the period that you used to apply for the 2019 first round. And if this is your first time applying, you need to make sure if you're using the annual gross receipts, or if you're using the fourth quarter, whatever quarter you're using, make sure you're aware of that. So when it's time for the loan forgiveness or reapplication for maybe a second round for you and a third round for others, that you still show that amount of reduction in your gross receipts. Now, it says in determining whether the applicant experienced at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts for loans above $150,000, the applicant must identify the 2020 quarter meeting this requirement, identify the reference quarter, and state the gross receipt amounts for both quarters, as well as provide supporting documentation. Now, for loans of $150,000 and below, these fields are not required, and the applicant only must certify that the applicant has met the 25% gross receipts reduction at the time of the application. However, upon or before seeking loan forgiveness or upon SBA request, the applicant must provide and demonstrate that identifies the 2020 quarter meeting this requirement. It identifies the reference quarter, states the gross amount for both quarters, and supports the amount provided. For all loans, the appropriate reference quarter depends on how long the applicant has been in operation. So make sure you know the date your business was started, if it's a new company, and even if it isn't a new company, still put that information in, because that is one of the questions. So make sure you are doing that. Okay. And it's not as complicated. It's a pretty quick, simple application. But here's some, it says, listed below are considered owners of the applicant as well as principals. For sole proprietorship, the sole proprietor. For partnerships, all general partners and limited partners owning 20% or more of the entity of the firm. For a corporation, all owners of 20% or more of the corporation. For an LLC, all members owning 20% or more of the company. And trustor, if the applicant is owned by a trust. That's any trust or any trustee. So let's see. I think that's it on there. But, it's been a pretty simple process. And like I said, go to the SBA.gov website and get the information or the loan application and read some of the guidelines. Make sure that you fill it out first, just yourself. And so when you go to the website, your financial institution's website, you'll already have the answers and you can complete it and get it submitted. Don't procrastinate on this because, as we know from before, the early bird got the worm. And folks that put it off, money ran out, they didn't get anything, and there'll probably be more rounds, but just don't wait. Don't procrastinate. Take action. A lot of people want results, but they don't take action. So that's one of the key things. Do what you're supposed to do. Take care of your business. If you're a business owner, this should be a priority. Again, the people the entities that can apply for the PPP first round: sole proprietors, partnerships, LLC or limited liability companies, S and C corporations, self-employed individuals, independent contractors, meaning you either get 1099 from someone, 501c3 nonprofit entities, 501c6 organizations, 501c19 organizations, which are veterans organizations, housing co-ops, and tribal businesses. So if you fall into any of those categories, go ahead and apply for the PPP if you haven't applied the first time. If you've already gotten it the first round, apply for that loan forgiveness and apply for the second round of PPP. Again, tax season is just around the corner. If you're a corporation, you can apply, you can e-file your tax returns now. If you're an individual, it hasn't opened up for e-file, but make sure whoever your tax preparer is, you let them know if you have not received your rebate, your stimulus payment, because this is how you'll get it. If you didn't get it the first time for a child that was eligible, or if you didn't get it the second time at all, this is the time and this is the place for you to, to get it. So make sure that your tax preparer is aware of the status of your stimulus, whether you got it or not. Let them know so they can determine what's the best route for you. Again, if you were unfortunate enough to get foreclosed, repoed, or have a write-off, charge-off on a credit card or loan, make sure you get that 1099-C from whatever financial institution financed those products and give it to your taxpayer, preparer, because if you don't, it'll come back to bite you. You want to make sure that your tax return is properly filed. And if your tax preparer doesn't ask probing questions, then you need to get up and find someone else, because they need to ask those questions to paint the accurate picture of what your financial tax liability would be. So you want to get the maximum refund or have the minimum tax liability. I do have a tax preparation firm, so if you're interested in using my company services, just private message me on Facebook. And also, I'd like to offer my free guide to overcoming the 6 obstacles to winning the money game by texting the word guide, GUIDE, to 770-796-4944. That's guide, GUIDE. Text it to 770-796-4944. And if you want to get a copy of my book, Diagnose Your Financial Health, it's available on Amazon, and it's a good read, only 100 pages. You can read it in an hour, but it'll give you some valuable information about how to see where you are, take control over your finances, get the proper protection to prevent financial ruin, and become financially free to live the life you desire. So go ahead and get your mindset right. get informed, learn about your finances, because the lack of knowledge, a people perish for the lack of knowledge. And we don't want you to perish because you don't know any better. So make sure that you empower yourself. So this is the end for this series, but I'm going to do another series as the time goes on. I want to keep you abreast of what's happening with the economic stimulus, because we do have a new administration coming in. And if you watch the news, you saw that President-elect Biden has some very aggressive and assertive, I should say progressive, or whatever the term, ways to get the economy back on track. And part of that is a potential for $1,400 in additional economic stimulus. So I'm going to keep you abreast. If you join my Facebook group, The Financial Cures, you'll get firsthand information. And I'm also available on Facebook at Wendy Labat, or Dr. Wendy Labat, or The Financial Cures, or again, you can join my Facebook group, The Financial Cures. I post on LinkedIn at Dr. Wendy Labat. I post on Instagram at dr.wendy.labat. So, if you need some specific information, you can always private message me or direct message me through Messenger. So I'm here to help. I'm here to empower you. I'm the financial healer, because that's what I'm all about, helping you heal your finances. So have a good week. Get your information together, so when it's time to file those taxes, which is only going to be in a couple weeks, you'll have your information in, because people want to get money. And another thing, if you got health insurance through the exchange, you need to have Form 1095A that you will provide to your tax preparer. That has to be filed and submitted so that it can reconcile the subsidy you receive to help pay for your health insurance. So make sure you take advantage of it, because everything is hinging upon filing your tax return. Don't try to stay under the table. Make sure that if you have a business, if you have a side hustle, make it a legitimate business, because that's the way to go, because you limit yourself if you don't. So again, I'm Dr. Wendy Labat, the financial healer, and I look forward to seeing you again. And I'll post when I'm going to have my next series. Thanks. Have a good weekend.